So thanks everyone for being here. My name's Davy Phillip and I am with Cultivate and I'm part of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance Hub in Ireland. Thanks for joining us at this Reclaim Economy session. This marks the launch of the Reclaim Economy project, a 6-month eco-literacy or economic literacy project and co-design journey that we're doing with FASTA with support from the Environmental Pillars Economy Hub. And we're also part of the Global Reclaim Economy Week. And many people here might be coming through the map and the events that are taking place in that week. So we can all tell the challenges we're in, the converging crises, the ecological and climate breakdown, the cost of living, inequality, the erosion of our well-being. And it's time really to stop treating these as separate predicaments and recognize them for what they are, symptoms of an economic system designed for extraction and infinite growth on this finite planet. So we need to start to consider how we respond to that. And that's what the Wellbeing Economy Alliance is all about. And over the next 6 months that we're going to jointly develop in a co-design process, a Reclaim the Economy 101, an accessible and practical guide that will demystify economies and see and distinguish the connections between them and help us imagine and work towards an economy that serves people and planet. So today we're getting started with that process, and we're delighted that we'll start with a provocation from Mark Garavan, an introduction to 3 forms or models of economy, the well-being economy with Carolyn White, doughnut economics from Roisin Markham, and feminist economies or economics from Vanessa Conroy. And then we'll have time for your insights and reflections. But to build a sense of community, I'm inviting you to maybe start to share where you are in the chat, and also encourage you to ask questions, share insights, links, anything relevant into the chat, because we'll be harvesting all of this as part of our process. And to kick us off, I'm going to invite Lisa Ho-Stewart from WEAll Global to say a few words on this special week. So, Lisa.
Thanks, Davy, and hello from Glasgow. So other side of the water if you're in Ireland, but I know that people are joining today from all over the world. So just for 5 minutes max, explain what Reclaim the Economy Week is. You're on day 2 of the world's first Reclaim the Economy Week, and recognise some faces that were there yesterday for the launch event as well, which you'll be able to access. I'll put a link to that in the chat if you missed it, because it was brilliant. And this week is essentially a moment for the movement, the broad and diverse and beautiful movement for economic system change, to come together, to unite and demand an economy that puts people and planet first. And some of you may already consider yourself part of that movement, or you might be new to it, but we know that people all over the world are really hungry for action on climate change, on inequality. And as Davy said, the economy is at the heart of all of these crises. And if we don't transform the economy, we're not going to be able to tackle any of those issues that are facing us or the planet. So this Reclaim the Economy Week is a global moment that we've strategically positioned just after Davos, when we saw the other side of the current economic system being celebrated last week in Switzerland. That the Wellbeing Economy Alliance and Earth for All, which is connected to the Club of Rome, have teamed up to organise the week, but the dream is that it belongs to everybody, that it's highly decentralised, a pluralistic week, and that's certainly what has come to life. We didn't really know what to expect since this is the first year and we're just trying it, but as of about an hour ago, we've got 99 events around the world this week, from seed swaps to song sessions to webinars like this one. If anybody fancies organising one more so we can say we got 100, you've got till Sunday to organise something, and that would be hugely appreciated. But the invitation to the movement was to use this moment, use this week of global solidarity in whatever way is helpful to everybody that's already working towards economic system change, so that we can highlight campaigns and messaging on a whole range of economic approaches, some of which you'll hear about today. So there's a huge range of stuff going on. I'll whiz through some quick slides about how you can get more involved with the week before we get into the webinar proper. So first QR code of several to share, and then I'll pop all the links in the chat as well. We've got this gorgeous playlist that I had the pleasure of building over the weekend that we've crowdsourced from our movement. So 170 people have each contributed a song when they were prompted with what are the anthems for reclaiming the economy. And it's now my favourite playlist, so highly recommend. This QR code takes you to a tool that you can hopefully access it on any streaming platform that you use. So as a movement, we have no shortage of anthems, it turns out, so enjoy that. And Davey mentioned the map. Some of you might have found your way to this event today through this map of events, which is being added to all the time. The yellow ones are the online ones and the red are in person. So there's a whole range of other things happening online this week that you can join from wherever you are. Another QR code there to take you directly to the map and you can navigate your way around that. And this is just a few of the other things that are happening this week. We've got an event in India that's a seed swap and discussion about economic system change. The Care Economy Week happening in South Africa. We've got conversations happening in France based on degrowth academia and some more online offerings there. Just a bit of a preview for you of just some of the snapshots of what's happening this week. And we've also yesterday launched a petition that we'd love for you all to sign and share. I'll put all these in the chat, but you can snap the QR code if you want. We're aiming this at all political leaders. So this is really looking for a symbolic petition to try and get as many names and numbers behind this call, this rallying call, that we can then use individually in our advocacy work in different countries. So please do follow this link and pop your name in there. And if you're not already part of this community, this might be a first step in how to get involved. And the last thing to say is that the Global Wellbeing Economy Alliance community is huge and growing all the time. The Ireland hub is one of 22 country hubs now around the world. I see some people in the room from the England hub and other places as well, so it's great to see you here. And we have this online community, the WEAll Together platform. So that's another link that you can follow if you want to connect in more, if you want to find different communities of practice, communities of interest. We've got academic groups on there, we've got place-based groups, lots of different ways to plug in and stay connected with what's happening in WEAll. So I will stop now, but I'm here for any questions. I'll pop my email address in the chat as well in case anyone wants to follow up with WEAll Global about the week. Thanks, Davey.
Brilliant, Elisa. That was a great start and good luck with the rest of the week. I really want to get to a couple of the ones in Australia, so hopefully you're recording those. So welcome everyone. This is the start of a 6-month process with the same name as the week, Reclaiming the Economy, demystifying the different types of economy that we hear, seeing how they interact and how they help us imagine and design an economy that works for people and planet. And we're delighted to have Mark Garavan with us to open up this conversation. I call it a provocation. Mark probably doesn't like that, but I think it's good to be provoked in these crazy times. So, Mark, you're very welcome.
Thanks very much, Davey. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I have to make a technical apology because I realise that PowerPoints are kind of the thing, but I don't do them. So I kind of keep away and just go back to talking, which is not the best online sometimes. Also, this idea of provocation. There's something about having to be a kind of a provocative type of character, so I'm not gonna try and do that. I could say something provocative like I'm going to talk about a big beautiful economy, and try and get away with those kind of provocations, but I'll avoid all of that as well. The good news is it's only 15 minutes and I'm pretty good on time, so don't worry. I will end exactly on time. Look, one of the things that we're trying to do here, I think, is to find a way of gaining purchase on the scale of the challenge before us. And often, the work of thinking is quite often it involves being able to see things accurately, which sounds kind of banal, but so often the difficulties that we have and the paralysis that can result is everything is so obscured and it's so hard to just gain purchase. And I remember this from Naomi Klein's book, you might remember No Logo, many years ago. And she made an interesting comment in it, which is it's very difficult to oppose the system because it has no edge. You can't get to the edge of it to have a go at it. You're always in it and there's no way out. So I find that just conceptually very interesting. As a result, there's so many different perspectives that you could take on the system, if we just call it the system for the moment. And I don't at all propose to have a privileged perspective on it, not at all. And we'll hear other perspectives and other ways of trying to think about contemporary economics and new types of economics, all of which are extremely helpful. And visual images are very helpful, like doughnut. I think that's a very, very helpful way of understanding. For me, the notion of care has become quite central to how I begin to think about the system. I have retired recently from being a lecturer, and I was lecturing for over a quarter of a century in the west of Ireland. And I saw students over that 26, 28-year period. And the change in the way they were presenting and speaking and experiencing the world, to me, was really striking. And I'll give you a very simple image of this. When I was a student, which is now over 40 years ago, when I was a university student, our campus used to be dominated by politics. We had political signs everywhere, and all we ever did was protest. Like we would go out onto Shop Street and sit down and block traffic as a kind of regular. If we didn't do this every few weeks, we would feel that we were failing in our duty as students. Or we would occupy the canteen regularly to drive down the price of coffee, or we'd occupy the library. When I look at modern campuses, certainly the one that I'm familiar with, there are no political messages on the campus. The messages are all mental health messages. They're all about psychology, and they're all about mindfulness and yoga and looking after yourself and talking to someone. I'm not saying that in any way to mock that. I understand where that's coming from, but there's been a very interesting switch from the outer and taking agency on changing the world to the inner and trying to get yourself aligned with the world. I think this is a very profound and subtle difference. And I see in the students a growing distress around this project of alignment with the way the world is. This is one of the great dystopian fears that people like Herbert Marcuse had when he wrote in the 60s about one-dimensionality, that we'd end up flattened to fit into a flattened kind of a world. To me, care is quite interesting because I think, and I worked in care work for a long time also, so many people experience the modern world as a careless world. They don't feel cared for. And if there's one good thing about Trump, and I mean this seriously, if there's an advantage in him, he is an illusion destroyer. He is revelatory of the nature of the system in ways that slicker personifications of the system like Obama or Clinton or someone wouldn't have been. So Trump, to me, one of the defining videos of the Trump era is him flying in his jet aircraft over the protesters and dumping effluent on them. I mean, that's such an extraordinary image that even any leader would do that they would so clearly visualize their inner psychological state vis-a-vis their fellow citizens. And if that's not a wake-up call for the fellow citizens, I don't know what is, if you're going to be pooed upon and laughed by the elite leadership. So this notion of being careless or living in a careless world, I think, is really, to me, quite a profound existential experience of our time, that reality is precarious. And you could see this as well in Gaza, obviously, which is another kind of revealing of the nature of the system, the utterly careless way in which a huge modern military went about dealing with civilians, controlling food and so on. We see it in many, many other countries. And in addition to this kind of systemic carelessness, what is also a new feature, I think, is the targeting of people who are involved in the professional practice of care work. Again, you saw that in Gaza, with care workers, whether they be health workers or medical workers or search and rescue people or doctors or nurses, clearly being systematically targeted. You see this in the United States in those people who are working in care work again, especially around the southern US border, who are working with refugees and migrants coming across from Mexico and South America, and how they're being criminalized for their practice. In other words, care now becomes dangerous, care work becomes dangerous and becomes something that can get you criminally indicted. So we really have gone over some critical thresholds. Now, I think, so here's the first provocation, if it's a provocation I'm supposed to do. So the first one would be that this isn't an anomalous outcome of the system. This seems to me to be the logical endpoint of, if you like, the final culmination of capitalism, which is the neoliberal version of it. Inevitably and logically has to culminate in the production of carelessness. Now, I think carelessness has a few different meanings. I mean, carelessness is a systemic motivation not to care, but it's also a disregard for the consequences of one's action. It's like the paper cup, once to be used and a plastic lid on it, you just throw it away. It's trivial. It's not something you have to think about. You're careless about it. Putting a bomb into an apartment block, well, are there people there? Are there not people there? You can be careless about it because these people don't count. They don't matter. Rounding up people who just happen to look like what is the latest Somalis, because Somalis are garbage. They're nothing. So there's a carelessness. We've lost a whole conception of dignity of the human person. And this seems to me, again, how the system has to culminate before it truly disintegrates. It has to culminate in this careless posture because it inevitably creates atomized individuals. And I'm not going to go into all of this. You are all experts in this. You know this. We know enough about this. This is the inevitable, socialization process of a kind of capitalist world. And individuals who are kept in social order because of the maximization of desire, their own desires, and the notion that they live in a realm of complete choice, and that they can choose the conditions of their own life simply by making good choices. And the internet, the algorithms of the internet wrap themselves around your own desires and they feed them back to you in a constant mirror. And so you're presented with your own desires all the time, and the system's rationale is to deliver those desires to you. And if you don't get those desires within an individualized socialization process, you think the reason is because of some fault on your part. It's your fault. You didn't work hard enough. You didn't get the right degree. It's clearly a fault because the system is totally free for anyone to attain desires. But empirically, nobody gets their desires. It's not even a good thing. So the notion of limit isn't built into it. And so any argument about limit starts becoming perceived within this socialized space as a highly negative thing. So this is why environmentalism and ecology and sharing and collectivism and solidarity start becoming negatives, because they seem to impede the individual project of limitless desire. And so they can be presented as interruptions to what the subject is meant to get or meant to achieve. But the lack of being able to achieve your desires, of course, leads, again, psychologically to frustration and anger. And so that's what we're seeing now. So if we were doing a kind of a psychological topology, the map of emotions, we've had the massive ramping up of desire from 1990 onwards, especially turbocharged through the internet. It hits its obvious buffers because you can't just do that. And so then you get anger and rage and frustration, and that has to be channeled somewhere. And so it's channeled now to the outsider, the other, the migrant, the refugee, or whoever you want, or the racialized versions of who the other will be. And so this anger gets channeled politically. And so the only thing that's left then after all of this anger, the only logic that's left in a world of atomized individuals is the logic of pure force and pure might and the rule of post-truth, which is you simply achieve social ends through the assertion of naked power. There's nothing else. If everyone is atomized and it's all about desires, and my desire beats your desire if I'm stronger than you and have more power than you. So the real world limits that the system hits, and the limits are to do with inequality and ecological catastrophe, these have to be repressed and obscured from view, and you have to be represented with channels that are presented to you as the real causes of the limits of your desire, the outsider, the foreigner. And so hence we have the kind of politics that we're seeing now, and a real struggle that's going to happen for the next few years. I mean, this, I would not underestimate this struggle between achieving a clear vision of what's happening and the obscured visions that the far right and a renewed fascism will bring before us again, because after all, the means of communication are under control and they're beamed into our brains constantly every day. The other problem we have is commodified social care, commodified again under capitalism, is simply inadequate to meet the demands of care that the system will throw up. There's always a deficit, so there's always a need for more care than is available within the commodified system. So that's all problematic. So we all know this. So I've got 4 minutes. Again, I'm not losing focus on time. So where do we go? And I personally have never been an optimist until now. I'm officially outing myself as an optimist. I feel actually very optimistic, because it's like that Father Ted episode where he hates airplanes and then he's on a plane and it crashes. And the minute it begins to crash, he's totally calm because this is what he always expected. Well, I'm that. So in the world of Feasta, we waited for this moment and now we're in it. And somehow I actually find it quite comforting, not in some obscure, weird way, but because the only move forward is the recovery. There's nothing else. Now, we could, apocalyptic nihilists, we could, but I don't think so. I think, and the reason for that again is care. Because the eros that drives the contemporary system, the desire for limitless limitless consuming, meets an even greater force, which is the force of care. Care and the need to care, the need to be cared, is an even stronger force. And I think that kicks in when people are put into crisis modes. They will immediately go to care, because contrary to the mantras and the dogmas of modernity, with Darwin and humans are self-interested, they're not actually. Freud, we are only driven by desire. No, I don't think so. And all of these, these key pillars of the very structure of thinking of modernity. In fact, care is more fundamental. Once you have children, once you have dependent relatives, once you see someone ill within your neighborhood, you are inevitably drawn to respond to them, to look after them, even if it involves sacrifice of yourself, giving up of your own projects. So care is a stronger force than desire. And it has to be, because our bodies are vulnerable. We are codependent. We are able and willing to sacrifice in pursuit of an objective greater than ourselves. And this will allow us, I think, to have, if you like, consensual limits that don't have to be imposed. Tim Jackson has written a book just recently called The Care Economy. And he talks about we need to contrast Adam Smith's notion of the invisible hand with the invisible heart. The invisible heart, which actually animates the social world and actually animates human beings. Now, this is very gendered. So because it's so often made to be the world of women, it again gets marginalized. All the labor of care, all the work of care. Economics is often, I think, a work of the imagination. So like a sublime object of ideology, this obsession with growth and progress and so on. But I think a new story that gets us past the illusions of the system is one that has care repositioned as our relational ethic, as a more attractive force than individual self-pursuit. And I think here we can return to maybe a Greek, that Greek notion of oikos, eco, the home. Economics is how we manage the home. Ecology is how we talk about the home, how we talk about our common home. And so in a way, we're doing what Schumacher said in his great book way back in 1972, was it? He said, we're either going to have forward stampeders and they're going over the cliff, just like Roadrunner, or homecomers back home again. And so care and home, these are primal, profound images. How to come home. Home is the place where care is animated collectively. I think gives us at least a visual way to begin to think about dialoguing with the system. It's exactly 5-2. I'm ending.
You're a superstar, Mark. And how to come home. What a lovely way to end such a fantastic provocation. So I feel provoked. I hope we all do, into thinking deeper and wider. So let's take a pause. We've got a bit of time for any reflections or insights. I can see you all, but you might want to put your hand up if you want to come in. And if you're coming in, do keep it brief. And it could be an insight. Doesn't have to be a question to Mark. It's nice to have this pause as well. There's wonderful reflections and insights in the chat. There's a great sense of community, international community in the chat. And Awasha.
Yeah, hi. That is great listening to Mark. So I was thinking from a feminist perspective, like the way liberal feminism is framed is like women going towards men, like what is framed as male virtues. And I think Mark's reflection about what he was saying regarding the student protests and later about care in general is also linked with how the whole society has kind of moved away from the perspective of care as an important virtue. So I always look at it from a feminist perspective, and I'd like to know if Mark has some comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's slightly dangerous for me to comment on feminism, so I'm not sure I'm the best position to do that. But I think that's right. Yeah, I think it was interesting that within the liberal feminist movement, clearly had strategic choices to make, and what I think happened in the obscuring of social class is that a lot of liberal feminism did indeed attempt to replicate the project of men, as opposed to claiming the unique and I think really critically important valuing of the work of women. Now, that's not to essentialize. It's very dangerous territory to answer this question of either side, but we needed a correct balancing, which is that men also had to be structurally transformed into the work of care in ways that they were avoiding. And I think that's a critical thing. There is a male way of caring and a female way of caring as archetypes and both are required for holistic care. In other words, there's a holding and a letting go. Both are practices of care. But this is a big topic for another day rather than a simple answer.
Thank you.
But thank you. That was a very good comment on your part. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Anwasha. There's no more questions or observations. We might just keep going. We now have 3 short presentations introducing different aspects or ways of thinking about the economy. We're going to start with Caroline White from FASTA on the wellbeing economy, and then with Roisin look at the doughnut economics, and then with Vanessa introducing feminist economies. So we'll start with you, Caroline.
Thanks, Davy. Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you all. It's great to see such a great mixture of people. So like Davy said, my name's Caroline White, and I work for FASTA, which is a small non-profit that's working on economic system change. And the word FASTA, it means henceforth or from now on in the Irish language, but it's not only focused on Ireland. We're looking at wider changes as well. I'm going to share a few slides. you have to forgive me. I'm going to keep this on presentation view, or not on you know, working through view, because when I put it in presentation, it always freezes. So sorry about this. But this beautiful first slide and quite a few of the other ones are actually from the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and I'm going to explain what that is in a second. So basically, I'm going to be talking about the wellbeing economy. What is wellbeing economics? And so, first of all, what's the economy in the first place? And I'm sure a lot of you maybe know this already, but it's a very old word, the word economy. It's from ancient Greek, and it's been around a long time. And the original meaning of it was household management. So it was to do with allocation of resources in a just, or in a manner that was functional and worked well. And it's very interesting to think about now, because we still use that word and that meaning quite a lot, but it's come to have other meanings as well. And I'll talk about that in a second. But I think it's interesting to just think about, what is this word economy and what does it mean really, you know? So basically, the way things are now, this is another slide from WEAll, is that a lot of the time, the way that we are supposed to function and the way the planet is supposed to function, it's as though the economy is some kind of end goal. It's something we're working towards, you know, rather than the economy being something that's supposed to be in service of us and, you know, delivering what we need and what the planet needs to survive. So there's a strange kind of topsy-turvy situation. And it seems very far away from the idea of household management, or, you know, making sure resources are shared in a good way. And in fact, the person who came up with the idea of GDP growth, who first defined this, you know, which is often conflated with economic growth, or, you know, with economic progress, gross domestic product, you know, more consumption, more production all the time. The economist called Simon Kuznets, he was very clear right from the start when he did it. This is actually not a measure of progress. You know, if you look at an expansion of GDP, it's not inherent, and it's not clear at all that this is actually making things better for everyone. And he said, you really have to be careful about what exactly is growing and who it's benefiting, whether it's quality, whether it's quantity. All of these things need to be looked at. So he was very clear, and lots of other people have been warning all along the way that this is, you know, we need to be very careful about what we consider to be economic progress, and be thinking, you know, questioning assumptions that get made about it. And yes, we have the situation where I picked out a couple of prominent Irish politicians here, and one who isn't Irish, who you all recognise, and basically across the spectrum, mostly anyway, in politics, politicians speak as though, you know, it's the case that we're all working for the economy, you know, that the economic growth or GDP growth is the goal. What I find fascinating about, here on the left, we have the current leader in Ireland, which is Micheál Martin, for those who aren't from Ireland. And we also have Mary Lou McDonald, who's the head of the main opposition party, Sinn Féin. And they're both saying almost exactly the same sentence, you know. And what's fascinating is that the way they're saying it is that we need to invest in infrastructure and in public services and so on in order to have economic growth. Like, that's the point, you know, of all this investment, is to achieve economic growth. That's the end. And by that, they mean GDP growth, you know, expansion of production and consumption. Thankfully, across the pond, of course, we have, you know, the president there who's got it all sorted, and he was just telling us that we have great growth there, so everything's fine. So that's us told. So we all know that. So that's great. So anyway, basically, there's a very strong overlap between the idea of the well-being economy, which is an economy working for people, and doughnut economics, which Roisin is going to talk about shortly. I just wanted to flag that here because I think it's really interesting to put them side by side and to think of the doughnut as a way or a means to the end of the well-being economy. And Roisin will explain what the doughnut is in a little while. So as I already mentioned, I'm from Feasta, and Feasta, we've been going 25 years, and we're very focused on changing economic goals and how that can be brought about. And we were very delighted to come across WEAll, the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, about 5 years ago now, and we joined. And then we subsequently joined up with some other groups in Ireland, and we formed a hub, which in WEAll, there are lots of hubs, and Lisa mentioned this already, and the numbers keep going up. And I think it's 22, if I remember right, Lisa, at the moment, which is brilliant. So in fact, in Ireland, different hubs have different ways of organizing themselves. In Ireland, it's an all-island hub. We decided right away we'd like to bring in people from the north because we all need to be talking to each other and, working together well. And so we have Queen's University Belfast. We have a very creative theatre in Derry that's involved. We have ourselves who are kind of focused more on economics. We have a European-wide health forum, and we have Cultivate, which is Davy's group. And we have other members as well. These are the kind of founder members I'm listing here. So we're very, very, very vibrant, I would say. We've got loads going on. And as Lisa already mentioned, the hubs all over the world, and there's getting to be more and more, which is brilliant. You can look them up on the WEAll website. And basically, the Wellbeing Economy Alliance it's an alliance of alliances, and so it's not only about the hubs, although they're very important. There's also members. Some of these numbers are probably old, I imagine, because I've taken them off a website. So apologies, Lisa, if they're a bit out of date. But I know the hubs one is right. So there's also a group of governments who are working towards achieving a wellbeing economy called the WEGO governments. And then there's also lots of individual members, and there are people in a policymaker network as well. They're academics and ambassadors, and they're all working together. And the governments that are in the WEGO coalition, which is kind of civil servants a lot of the time talking together, are interesting to see the mixture, and who particularly is focused on this at the moment. As you can see, a lot of the Nordic countries are involved, with a few others as well. Wales has been a big front runner in all of this. And some of the things that WEAll and people in WEAll focus on, those different strategies, and coming in from different angles, and they all complement each other. You can see on the lower left of that little group of diagrams there, you've got doughnut economics, which we already mentioned. Then there's things like the circular economy, making the most of resources and making sure you're using everything as well as you can and efficiently. Community wealth building, which is a really huge focus for a lot of people here, probably, or certainly for some people here. Regenerative economy, where Kate Rayworth writes about that very well. She's the person who wrote about doughnut economics, making an economy that's not only subsisting, but actually helping everybody to thrive and nature to thrive as well. Economic democracy is very important. The relationship between inequality and problems in the world now is so incredibly close and tight. So making sure people have a voice, and not only a political voice, but an economic voice as well, is very important. Economy for the common good is another really interesting strand of thought. Solidarity economy. Sorry to be racing through this, but I know I've only 10 minutes, so I'm just touching on the topics, but you can find loads more about it all on the WEAll site. And then there's core economy as well, and foundational economy. So all different strands of thought that are brought together. And within WEAll, there are loads of very, very interesting thinkers working on these different aspects of well-being economics. This is just a little sampling of different people from all over the world who are working on all of this. You may recognize some of the names there. There's Tim Jackson up in the top right, for example, and there's Kate Rayworth, who I already mentioned. And then there's quite a lot of people from the global south as well, which is, of course, incredibly important and fundamental. So basically, as I've already mentioned, the kind of focus or the goal in the wellbeing economy is to deliver social justice on a healthy planet. And there's been really interesting research, and within WEAll, but also the Club of Rome, for example, have done very interesting global research on what are people's actual priorities. So instead of assuming that we all want this endless increase in production and consumption, and that's some kind of priority we've all decided on, which of course we haven't. Looking at actually what do people want, and what do people need most? And there's 5 core needs that have been identified as dignity, fairness, participation, nature, and then also purpose. So those are 5 really, really fundamental things that are needed that have been found in surveys to be very universal and very important for everybody, really. And it's striking how that's all over the world is the case. So basically, there's also principles within WEAll, ideas that's kind of help to drive, what decisions get made about the economy and how decisions should be made. So there's the idea, for example, of pre-distributing. power, wealth, time, and income. So there's you've got things like worker ownership of businesses, or you've got community wealth building. Just making sure right from the start things are built in as fair a way as possible. There's purpose that's got to do with goal and vision, which I've already talked about a bit. What's the economy for? What's the idea? What's our final goal with the economy? Then there's prevention, which is making sure, again, building in from the start ways to stop harm from happening in the first place in the economy. And then there's people powered, so making sure economic decisions are made by the people in a democratic way, or in a way that's collaborative. So I'm going to stop in a sec because it's 10 minutes. I just very quickly mention three things as well, three ways of bringing about the change that we all emphasize. Is there's changing narratives, so the way we talk about the economy, and then working on the institutional level with policy, and then building a power base, like building a movement of people around the world who can bring about the change. And here in Ireland, we have done various things in the hub. For example, in terms of narrative, we work a lot with artists. We have a cultural creatives program, and that's been really, really interesting. We've had some great workshops about that. In terms of policy, we just had a policymaker workshop last week, which we were really thrilled with how it went, and there was loads of interest. It was in Belfast, and there were policymakers from around Ireland at that. And then in terms of power, we've been organising conferences. We had a major event 2024, Rethinking Growth, and we have a huge one coming up, really big for us in 2027, which I'll talk about more later. So I'll pass on. Thanks a million, Davy, and everyone. Talk soon.
Thanks, Caroline. That's excellent, and really sort of shows why we need a economic explainer, and we need economic literacy, which is part of our longer Reclaim the Economy project. I invite you to put any questions into the chat or any insights after the next two presentations will open up. But we can answer these. If we can't answer them today, we can answer them potentially in the future. So I'm going to keep moving then and just introduce Roisin Markham. Roisin is part of the Irish Non-Economic Network and has been a pioneer in this approach. So Roisin.
Thanks, Davy. Hi, everybody. Really great to see so many people joining today, and congratulations to the WEAll global movement for creating this really focused Reclaim the Economy. I think it's a brilliant initiative. I think it's badly needed, and I really appreciate the invitation today for us all to come together to share different approaches, not just to reclaiming the economy, but to broadening our understanding around what the economy is. So I founded the Irish Doughnut Economics Network in 2020 and didn't really realize I was doing economic literacy until about a year and a half ago, but that's pretty much what we've been doing. I'm going to go through some slides. Some of them I'm going to talk to, and some of them you'll get the slides afterwards with the video, and you'll find links to all of the things I'm going to talk about on the Doughnut Economics Action Lab website. So IDEN is part of the Doughnut Economics Action Lab in the way that we are, although we are really independent, we look to the Doughnut Economics Action Lab, which Kate Rayworth co-founded, and we looked at them for our practicing principles, and we align to the things that they talk about and how they work and how we network and hold that space in a very light way. We're really about supporting learning. And for the last 3 years, I've focused very particularly on applying doughnut economics in a variety of different locations. I think this visual of connecting with others to make change visible is actually really important. And it's from one of the Dutch groups in doughnut economics. So both in terms of governments, corporations, enterprises, businesses, small enterprises, civil society, universities, communities, etc. Now, this is the everything about doughnut economics in one slide, except that last year, Kate and Andrew Fanning from the Doughnut Economics Lab updated doughnut economics. So that's coming in another slide shortly. So there's a QR code here to help you access it. I don't know how many people on the call have heard of doughnut economics. It would be really interesting if If you haven't heard of it, this is like a really good 101. But if you had heard of donut economics and have been following Kate and Aidan's work and the broader donut economics Action Lab movement, there's a few new bits in here as well. So this is pretty much what everybody thinks of. And as Caroline has already shared, the donut model in the middle. However, that's just one part of the story. These 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist, which is the subtitle of Kate's book, produced or published in 2017, this actually is what I end up talking about more. And in the last 3 years, I talk more and more about the embedded economy as well. So there's a link there to the update on the donut on the donut as it's moved from this donut 1.0 to now what we have which is donut 3.0. So again, these are donut economics. Actually, the practicing principles are really critical. So change the goal from GDP to donut economics or another broader economic aspect. I'm getting to the point where I don't care if it's donut economics. I just want us to see us move. I want to see us radically transform our economic systems, our economic education, and how we think about the economy living within society rather than, as Caroline said, the other way around. So see the big economic picture, which is the embedded economy piece, nurture human nature. We are not in this guise of our current economic system. We are set up as rational economic man. That's not true. We are pro-social humans, and the more we hear about, as Mark calls, autonomized individuals, that's what this current economic system does. However, Kate Raworth is really clear, and I really believe that we are not that individual, unlinked, rational economic man. That for me is kind of irrational because I really don't identify it. So nurture human nature is a massive piece. Get savvy with systems. And in the Irish context, we need to do much more work around systems education, systems thinking, and really bringing an understanding about the systems we live and operate in, and our society lives and operates in, to the fore more and more. Then the next one is be distributive by design. Number 6 is be regenerative by design, and this is the circular economy piece. Think again about growth. And this is not that growth is, so this is a really tricky one, right? So Kate never says she is against growth, and she caveats that by saying be more agnostic about growth. So I would say that while we understand, and we understand more and more, that the global south countries might need some growth to bring them into alignment with where current standards of living might be. In Ireland, for example, and very privileged global north societies, we have so much, and we need to start rebalancing with sufficiency to bring us back into alignment. And I'll speak more about this. So again, this is just this is a really important graphic that I just really wanted to include. I'm not going to talk about it. There are brilliant little videos on the Donut Economics Action Lab that you can find out more about. So I'm signposting it here. But again, just to note that I often say to people, where are you sitting? You might be sitting in a business, you might be sitting in your home, dialing into this, but where's the place that you woke up this morning? Where's the household? And that's often where we start eating breakfast or where we start caring. That's often the start of how our economy actually functions. I think as well, we really forget about the commons, and the commons is a lot like it's air, it's water, it's some of our forests, it's our land, it's our geomorphology, and they're really important things that we need to have more care and be more considerate on also. Right, this is the Down 3.0. And after this was published, ocean acidification, literally 2 weeks after it was published, the outer boundaries, which is the ecological ceiling, they are the bright red pieces that you see on the outside. We moved past, so there's 9 planetary boundaries. And when this went to press, the seventh boundary was just being breached and crossed, and that's ocean acidification. So this weird kind of piece up at the top right-hand side, I've added to the graphic. Kate, if you see this, I hope you don't mind. So this is kind of, so there's a couple of slides now that I talk about both business wise and in my activism work. And I feel that these are really important. We are carbon blind. The reason we're in the mess we are in is because of all of these things: topsoil loss, ecotoxicity, modern day slavery, plastic pollution, overconsumption, water crisis, inequality. All of these things really make this complex system that we're in. And this is a really critical way for us to think about it beyond carbon emissions. This is another shocking slide as well. So in 2026, Ireland's Earth Overshoot Day is the 14th of April. In 2024, it was the beginning of May. This is getting worse, not better. So when we hit April, the 14th of April, which is the beginning of the month, right? And not too far away, that's when Ireland basically has used all its resources. And every single day after that, we are stealing from the future and from future generations. And it is outrageous that we are not addressing pulling this back in and stopping behaving, not just, and particularly not as individuals, but as an economy, as a society, that we're not stopping treating our global supply chains, what the world has, in a way that we're acting like there are 3.4 Earths. So this is, I think, one of the biggest crises, is that we have human-centered design as opposed to relational design. So if we put the human at the top of the apex, we have this mess that we're in, which is causing lots of flooding in Ireland at the moment, with climate chaos and hugely impacting weather patterns. And we need to think about how we rebalance that, how we bring in relationship with other than human, with kin, with the resources that we have on the planet. So this is the Doughnut 3.0. There's two really significant things that have been done in updating Doughnut economics last year. And again, Davey, give me a time check. How long have I got?
Take another couple of minutes, Roisin.
Okay, so be aware that I can talk for a very long time about doughnut economics. Anybody who's heard me talk before about it will understand that. So what Kate and Andrew Fanning have done in this really interesting peer-reviewed piece of research is that they have disaggregated the doughnut by clustering countries into three groups: the poorest 40%, the middle 40%, the richest 20%. And this makes starkly visible the concentrated responsibility for planetary overshoot amongst the richest nations, in contrast to the concentration of human deprivation among the poorest. So again, I've skipped through the basic explanation of doughnut economics. On the outside, the ecological ceiling. On the inside, we have this social foundation, which is based on the SDG goals. And I think the work in updating Doughnut 3.0 really moves it really moves it into applied theory. So the next thing that Kate and Andrew have done is they've unrolled the donut further. And this was done before, but now in this diagram, they're evolving the donut into an annual report that really shows, by the way, they've named this diagram the baguette, which kind of is testament to the humor of the Deal team, I think. But it clearly shows that while the global economy has doubled in GDP terms over the last 2 decades, many global social shortfalls have been too slowly reduced, and many ecological crises have gone into further overshoot. The very fact that this is going to become an annual report, I think, dynamically moves doughnut economics into a tool which is going to really drive further policy design and further critical examination of what the hell are we doing. You know, some of us have been at this for over 20 plus years, and the frustration is that we see that we are still in this, you know, ecological boundary overshoot, and the inequalities that are being driven by decisions that are being made. So I'm just going to put this here. Doughnut economics in Ireland is just touching on the purpose of what the economy is, and is working with enterprises across Ireland as well as communities and places, and a lot of academic groups as well. This is my slide sharing the well-being economy, and I think it's really important. I talk a lot about language and how language shapes culture. Words matter. Dignity, purpose, nature, fairness, participation. Caroline, loved the slides you shared on it, makes it really accessible. And then moving into the end of my slides. Oh, that could be the end of my slides, actually.
Great.
So I just to say that I am going to be adding another event to the Reclaim the Economy. So we're going to be pushing up towards that 100 events, and that's a virtual cuppa on Thursday night for Iden for people to catch up. And I'll put the link and the Zoom details into the chat as well. Thanks, everyone.
Brilliant. Thanks, Roisin. That was just what we needed. This framework, I think, helps us see where a lot of the other economic approaches fit. We need that. We're going to keep moving now and then get into a bit of a discussion. So our final contribution is from Vanessa Conroy, and she is from the National Women's Council and is going to introduce us to feminist economics.
Thanks very much, Davy, and thanks for the invitation. And I've been a bit naughty, as you can see by the title, and I've rebranded as Eco-Feminist Caring Economics because there is such an overlap between the two. And I realise I also haven't actually included a slide for those who aren't familiar as to who the National Women's Council are. So the National Women's Council of Ireland is a membership organisation here in Ireland comprising of nearly 200 community groups and organisations all around the entire island of Ireland. In pursuit of gender equality and to advance the cause of feminism in Ireland. We celebrated our 50th anniversary a few years back. So we're continuing the work, even though in quite a difficult, I think, political context for us right now. But, we never got anything done by getting under the bed covers and crying, although sometimes that is useful at times. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about eco-feminist caring economics. I myself am the Climate Justice Policy and Engagement Officer at the National Women's Council of Ireland, where we talk about creating a gendered feminist analysis of climate justice specifically for the Irish context. But I think this description that I've put of feminist economics can be applied to a variety of countries. So there's a few quotes in these slides. I won't read all of them out word for word, but I think this is a really nice one, kind of just to set up the current context. Just describing our current economic system, maybe rules to determine what should be defined as economic activity need to be understood as an expression of patriarchal power that values militarism, environmental destruction, and tools of colonization while deeming peace, environmental resources, and social reproduction worthless. And I think really to jump off this presentation talking about the fact that we can't talk about the way that our current economic system kind of decides what is visible, what is invisible, what is valuable, and what is worthless without taking into consideration the way that power and gender are organized in our society and woven into our economies. And so just kind of 3 bullet points of maybe the top line of what feminist economics is. And really what it does is, again, it asks us to take a look at what is invisible, what is invisible, what is valuable, what is unvaluable or undervalued in our economies, and particularly along the lines of gender and where these issues tend to kind of intersect with each other. Some of the key issues that I'll discuss throughout, although 10 minutes isn't a huge amount, I could talk about this forever. A big piece, and I'm glad it came up so early on, is about kind of the exclusion of care work within our current economic system and within GDP, things like the gender pay gap and the oppression of women through existing patriarchal economic systems. And again, really underlining that economic systems aren't just these kind of value-free things existing completely objectively, that our ideas and current ideas of power, whether it comes to gender or colonization, are woven into these systems. and also to point out that feminist economics shares many of its viewpoints with ecological economics, which will come up kind of naturally throughout this presentation. I wanted to start with kind of the founding text, perhaps, of feminist economics, which is If Women Counted by Marilyn Waring. And very early on, I think, although I'm sure people were having kind of conversations about, different ideas around feminist economics. This is kind of like, for lack of a better term, the Bible, maybe. But very early on, Marilyn pointed out that women's unpaid work, as well as the value of nature, were not accounted for in national income accounting, so the measures that make up what a country reports in its GDP. And that's despite the fact that a number of non-market activities are included in the calculation of GDP, despite that exclusion of housework or care work or reproductive labor. She also links ongoing economic growth, that kind of pursuit of endless growth, to the oppression of women and the destruction of nature, and also critiqued fairly early on economic indicators as being a false representation of the well-being of communities, which I think we're quite well aware that Ireland is technically one of the wealthiest countries in the world. But if you look at the well-being of people in our society right now, you would find that, being a very rich country doesn't mean that we are very rich in terms of our life satisfaction and in terms of societal flourishing, in terms of things like access to housing and how we're tackling the climate crisis and things like gender equality as well. I wanted to put in a few definitions of care work, and Fisher and Toronto's definition is one of my very favorites. And they describe it as a species activity that includes everything we do to maintain, continue, and repair our world so that we can live in it as well as possible. That world includes our bodies, ourselves, and our environment, all of which we seek to interweave in a complex, life-sustaining web. And I think it really illustrates that, when we talk about care and care work, we're not just talking about caring for other humans, but we're talking about our interdependence in this world. And that, when we care, we should be caring for the planet and caring for nature, and that we are all entirely, we are in a life-sustaining web, and that, we cannot exist without the other. And then maybe in a more technical term for ourselves, this is from a piece of work we did in 2024 called the Feminist Climate Justice Report, talking about, for us, the National Women's Council, about what our ideas of care work are. And so we're talking about paid and unpaid care work, whether that's in the kind of formalized care sector of the economy, including social care, childcare, and healthcare, whether that is care work in a less formal setting, like in a care recipient's home. And then, very importantly, we talk about unpaid care work carried out in families and communities, and whether that is care for family members, neighbours, and networks of friends. So when I talk about kind of care work in the context of our own work and throughout this presentation, this is kind of, these two, I think, are kind of the ones to maybe keep in mind. And so thinking about care work as it exists in our current, maybe careless economies, basically that care work in the home is taken for granted, and child rearing and looking after sick family members and the upkeep of homes is work that is basically, it's taken for granted and it's expected you do it for free, because that's how it's always been done under our current economic system. And important to feminist economics is that this work is very highly gendered, and these were figures specifically around Ireland, but you'll see kind of a similar pattern throughout the world. In Ireland, 98% of full-time carers are women, and women still do twice as much unpaid caring work and housework as men. Our current economic system places care within that private sphere of the home and the family. And so it deems anybody within a household who is doing work within that household that isn't generating an income as unproductive member of society. So just to kind of really underline what the current economic system deems that reproductive labor and care work is. Despite that, care work is absolutely the foundation for a thriving society, but is fundamentally invisible and undervalued by our current economic system. It's treated as non-work if the government kind of announces that it's going to be spending money on bumping up, funding in childcare or social care. It's kind of seen as a cost rather than an investment in our future generations, or an investment in our current generation, to be honest. This is just kind of to show you the current context we're operating in within Ireland. We still have a very substantial pay gap and pension gap. And then again, despite the fact that we are one of the wealthiest countries in the world, we do see, like, quite stark figures about people who are at risk of poverty or who are experiencing enforced deprivation, missing 2 to 3 of the 11 deprivation indicators, like being able to afford a cooked, a cooked meal with a meat once a week, being able to replace clothes, being able to buy new furniture, and so on. And here we also have the gender care gap in Ireland, which is 15 hours per week between care work done by men compared to women. And then this, quite again, really topical in Ireland right now and unforgivable in a country which boasts to have so much wealth, to have so much industry and so on. Homelessness figures these are just for women and children, for more than 4,600 women and more than 5,000 children homeless. And these are the figures of November last year. So it's not the most up to date, but it's very shocking. And we're seeing month on month that is climbing again, despite being in a country that is one of the wealthiest in the world, if we're using GDP as our be all end all, which we are in our current economic system. And so just thinking about if care was counted in terms of our existing economic system, not that this is the perfect way of kind of really showing the value of care work, but just showing maybe what is not being counted. That, not to read out everything word for word, but the global economy of unpaid care work, if it was valued at minimum wage, would equal a contribution of at least $10.8 trillion annually, more than 3 times the size of the global tech industry. So more valuable than a lot of kind of the big problems in the world, your Elon Musks, your Mark Zuckerbergs, and so on. More valuable if it was actually counted in the existing economic system than those industries. In Ireland in particular, unpaid care work would add 24 billion euro of value to the Irish economy annually, equivalent to 12.3% of the Irish economy. And again, not to say that, oh, just chucking care work into GDP would solve our problems, but just really to show in hard figures the contribution that unpaid care work actually makes to the existing economic system. And I think this is a really stark one, that 65% of women's working hours are unpaid every week and excluded from official measures of economic activity. And that accounts for 45% of weekly working hours for adults. So again, the amount of work that is deemed unvaluable and invisible under the existing economic system. And again, when I said I was a bit naughty and changed track a bit to just feminist economics, I wanted to bring in, because again, there is such a kind of interconnection between eco-feminist thought and feminist economics and ecological economics. And just to say that ecofeminism is basically a branch of feminist thought that uses gender to analyze relationships and dynamics between humans and the environment, and relating the oppression of women to the oppression or destruction of the environment. And just a few examples of maybe how men dominate women and humans dominate nature, seeing men as the curators of culture and women as the curators of nature, and then women and nature as property. And just important, I think, to ecofeminist thought is that in our existing economic reality, nature and care work are kind of seen as the same. They're a tool of the current patriarchal, economic, neoliberal capitalist system, in that nature and care work are both essential to our survival. They are taken for granted and seen as infinitely available to prop up that existing system when that is not the case. And they are under or improperly valued. For example, the destruction of nature for profit to extract resources to make commodities with, that is its value. And its provision of clean air, of water, what pollination does for our food, those aren't seen as valuable to the current economic system. And ecofeminism would view that kind of patriarchal capitalism as a dual force which oppresses, exploits, and uses violence against both women and the environment for its own profit, inclusive of care work and reproductive labor. And I'm not going to read this whole concept out, or this whole quote out, but this is Cara Daggett's concept of petromasculinity, and just talking about, that kind of, again, this crossover between the oppression of nature and the oppression of women in our current economic system, and our current careless economic system. And just to say, these questions about the economy and the way that the earth and nature get recruited into the economy are very much related to how our current gender order is structured. And again, just really underlining the fact that these economic systems don't exist in valueless vacuums, that our ideas around power and domination, and particularly around gender, and particularly about maybe the lifelessness or the separation between humans and nature, play such a huge role in the way that the current economic order is structured. And then also, not to end it on the doom and gloom note, thinking about the alternative or careful economies. And this is actually from the Irish Environmental Protection Agency's Climate Change Assessment Synthesis Report of Ireland in 2023, which outlines that prioritisation of well-being and equity in development and climate policy could bolster the democratic social contract in support of the transformation required for us to have greener, sustainable, and more well-being centred economies. And that says here to include the improved quality of life, decent work, and the value of care. So there are thinkers out there, aside, we might think we maybe exist in a little bubble ourselves here, but there are people who acknowledge that putting well-being and equity and care at the centre of our economies is the way to proceed to have more sustainable, greener, and fairer economic systems. And I just want to end with a few bullet points about, how do we make our way towards these eco-feminist, careful economies? Yeah, for starters, we have to have an economic system that gives visibility and value to the essential work of caring for people and caring for nature. And we need to capture the importance of the work, whether it is paid or unpaid, whether it is just trees providing oxygen for us and bees providing pollination for us. We need to have an economy that shows how valuable and how essential that work is. And also we need to have economic systems that centre the provision of care for people and planet. And we should strive to make the provision of care easier, more gender balanced, and more accessible to everybody. And we know that endless growth is unsustainable for people and the planet, and economies must become more local and more circular, or maybe more donut shaped, to call back to Roisin's presentation. And this is my last slide here. How we can kind of maybe start these is having our economies enable care through the provision of decent jobs in care, for example, reduced working time, kind of bringing in that 4-day working week, for example, is a nice example. And then diverse income support policies, things in Ireland like, the artist basic income, universal basic income, forms of participation or care incomes that gives an income to work that is not currently seen as valuable, or work that is not currently seen as being worthy of a wage. And what we want to do is to relieve people of time poverty, of poverty itself, of inequality, and allow people to have time to just exist, to take that moment of pause, maybe that we had earlier in this webinar, and to be able to be better resourced to care for each other and to care for our world, through having more time for ourselves and having the proper value given to the work that they do. And that is me there. So thank you very much for having me. And I could have talked all day, but I hope I stayed within 10 minutes. I didn't actually have a timer on.
They were great. Thank you, Vanessa. Really important insights to weave into our inquiry. There's probably lots of questions, but hopefully as many insights and reflections that we can build on. We're going to go open up for maybe 15 minutes now. If you want to come in, please indicate, put your hand up. If we could stay as brief with our contribution, just allow as many voices in, that would be great. Hopefully there will be some voices coming in now. So, but thank you, Vanessa, Roisin, and Caroline, for outlining those three perspectives that are very, very much connected. So, And welcome to the people that have came in quite late there. And it's great to see so many familiar faces, as well as some people from outside Ireland or very far away, and some new faces even here in Ireland. Thanks, Mark.
No,
Would you like to come in? Yeah.
can I just ask, is there a possibility for Ireland embracing with its central bank the sort of modern monetary thinking about an economy to really unleash resources that could change a real system change away from the capitalist model, which is running out of steam now?
Thanks for that, Mark. I'm not quite sure how to answer that. I can't see how we can have the transformation needed within the current paradigm. Any of the speakers like to come in on that? Contributors?
Sure, I could just say a word. Thanks for that. Yeah, I think if I'm understanding right, you're talking about how the financial system and the way money is created, how changes to that would help to bring about the economic transformations we need. And I totally agree. I think you're right. It's difficult, as you might know, for Ireland to go it alone on this because Ireland's part of the Eurozone. So to get into technicalities, Ireland doesn't have its own currency right now. The ECB, the European Central Bank, could do something, and Ireland could do something along the lines of a complementary currency or something like that. But there's a lot of it's a huge subject, as I'm sure you know. I think personally, I think it's really, really interesting, and I think there is something there. But yeah, I think we'll have to have another session and talk it all through in detail. But yeah, thanks for bringing it up.
Mark, there's a lot of resources on the FASTA website, fasta.org, as this was quite a big theme of Richard Outhwaite that Mark mentioned, debt-based money and how this sort of drives the situation we're in. Stevie Downs, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. And can I say great thanks to all the speakers. Fascinating stuff. 2 points. One, maybe Vanessa may have some comment about this, but I'm sure all the speakers would have. I was just thinking about AI in relation to the question of that very far out possibility of a lower working week being produced as a result of AI and what opportunities there may lie in that respect. I mean, the prospect of having millions of unemployed potentially raises real issues for every capitalist state. And the second point is to do with degrowth. I was listening to Dr. Abby Innes, and she's a associate professor of political economies at the LSE, and she had mentioned a little bit of disquiet with the idea of degrowth. And she was just the concept, the term. She was saying that, of course, the right have jumped in this to say, look, these people just don't want anything to happen. And I'm wondering if there's another term we could use that would something like flourishing economy rather than just degrowth. Thanks.
Well, let me start, Stevie, because I think you've touched on something that's very relevant for a lot of people on this call that are part of the International Degrowth Conference next year in Cork, which I'll share the links in a second. I also resisted the word degrowth because it doesn't open conversations, it tends to close them. But anyone now reading the science or understanding where we're at, the levels of inequality, we have to degrow that industrial Western economy. And we had the international organizers from the other degrowth festivals. They were adamant we had to keep degrowth as every other term gets co-opted into the current economy. But it's a very current topic. We need degrowth, but how do we talk about it? Anybody else want to jump in there before
Yeah, I'd love to jump in. So, really interesting questions, Stevie. The degrowth one first. So the language changes all the time, and as I've said, language shapes culture and words matter. I think that when we shirk from words like degrowth, we have to really challenge ourselves about what's the meaning behind the word. And it's not an English first word. So when we come to it, we come to it differently. So I often share the story of the origin of the word, which is from French. And Caroline, you might pronounce it properly because I'll only butcher it. But it's something like décroissant or something like that. And it basically, the word means when a river in its flow bursts its bank, very relevant in my part of the world today because there's lots of flooding. But when a river bursts its bank, how it finds and reshrinks its way back to its path or flow. And when we think about degrowth like that and link it to land and to nature and to the commons, it changes our relationship to the word. So the words that I use are post-growth, and I'm seeing the language of sufficiency coming into policy also.
Yeah, thanks for that, Russian. Let's not go into the AI question, if that's all right, Stevie. We've only 5 minutes, and I really want to bring in Wisha, and if there's anyone else here. One of the things, just to finish on this degrowth, where we are now with this growth-based paradigm, where we need to go is post-growth. How we get there is degrowth. What are those mechanisms to contract that economy? Where we're heading for is post-growth. There's a big, and we maybe do a whole webinar on this as we get closer to the conference next year. And Wesha, do you want to come in? And hopefully I'm getting your name right, lad.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you. I have like two related questions. The first one is not specific to care work, but care as a value. So from a policy perspective, how does an employer uphold the value of care in the context of employability? So within the framework of meritocracy, how do you apply care when you decide about the employability of your potential workforce? First, and related to that, I'm coming to the care profession, because a lot of jobs in the care professions, especially frontline workers, not all of them need or have a lot of degrees. So that is also related to why the profession is undervalued. I hope I have made it clear. Yeah. So my main question is about employability, and that relates to employability within the care sector. Thank you.
Yes. Vanessa, do you want to maybe quickly respond to that? There's a lot there in Russia to go into in the last few minutes. But...
like, oh, closing words. Okay, no pressure. I think in terms of, I want to actually come to the piece on, like, the undervaluing of care work, and maybe that it doesn't require as many degrees, is maybe a conversation to think about, why do we afford higher value to work that has, like, a lot of maybe degrees or specialization behind it, when we know inherently that regardless of degrees, there are, like, parents all over the world bringing up children without any degrees that are, like, warming homes, like, tending to sick relatives, looking after communities, even thinking of, like, the floods right now or Storm Eowyn here last year. Communities didn't need any kind of degrees to come together and look after each other. And it is really just fundamentally thinking about, if there was nobody here to care, like, tomorrow, our societies would fall apart. It's incredibly valuable work. And really what feminist thought or ecofeminist thought would pertain is that this work is highly gendered. And so it is highly gendered. It's not seen as productive because it doesn't make a wage in most cases. And it doesn't, like, it isn't included in the current description of the economy. And that, that is why it is undervalued, because we've pretty much built a system where, again, it's taken for granted that you'll do that care work because it has to be done, but you'll do it with no pay because it's expected that you do it for no pay. In terms, I'll go really quickly to maybe the employability piece, but in terms of maybe some of the pieces we've done ourselves, I think it is putting care at the center of your organization. And sometimes that is stuff like, menstrual leave, carers leave, allowing kind of flexible work, like, not in the office 5 days a week, but even for smaller things like, would you be able to bring a baby to the office if you absolutely had to? And I think it's about, like, not seeing it as there's a huge amount of work we have to do. There's very like, manageable steps that are already in place in some organization. It's about normalizing those really and building the world that we want to have in the future right now in our own little corners and making sure that it spreads.
Yeah, I think that how we build that future, how we provision for ourselves, how we build that resilience as the disruptions from this current economy start, I think is really important. There's some really interesting pieces in the chat around some of the things that might support that. And I think this economic literacy project we're starting today, we can start to tease out and bring in what some of these things are. Like the community wealth building approach, I think, is fundamental, I think, to building stronger local economies. Ema Rashukra there's got a lot of things that FAST have looked at in the past, like the land tax and land trusts. There's so many things that are almost invisible that we need to make more visible to shift the narrative to what we've been talking about today. If anyone is holding on to someone that they're sitting with, now's the opportunity. We've got maybe a few minutes before we just start closing and signposting to some next steps. Well, let me start closing then. So yes, this has been a great kickoff for this economic literacy project, which we're also titling Reclaim the Economy, which is part of this Action Week at WEAll Global. Our next steps is we'll do another webinar, and we're looking to, over the next 6 months at some time, have an in-person co-design session, probably here in Jordan, where I'm based. And the output is to be an explainer, Reclaim the Economy 101. And so keep an eye on the WEAll website, or I'm just going to put into the chat just now the link for the WEAll newsletter, which then we can keep these opportunities. It's been mentioned a few times, but I'll just put the link to the launch details. The organising committee is a growing committee. Some of the people are on this call, but we're holding the 12th International Conference on Degrowth for Ecological Sustainability and Social Equity in August 2027 in Cork City. So this is a big event for this sort of alternative economics or wellbeing economics movement. I don't know if there's any other, oh, sorry, I haven't pressed the button to share that link for the degrowth details. And there'll be more details coming up soon. So is anyone sitting with something they needed to say, or will I start closing? This has been a really, really rich conversation. I will be pulling out both the chat and the recording. And I've invited Vanessa, Roisin, and Caroline and Mark to write articles that will be part of this primer. So they'll be doing bringing these together. Our next webinar will be looking at other forms of economy, social solidarity economy, circular economy, and starting to think about how all these fit together. So thanks, Vanessa, Caroline, Roisin, and Mark. Thanks to Lisa and everyone at the WEAll Global and this Rethink or Reclaim Economy Week. And thanks to all of you for taking an hour and a half out to join this conversation. It's been fantastic, and thank you.